الوحي عنوانا وشاد من نوره في القلب إيمانا وغذ في السير.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. And welcome to another video on the Islamic Knowledge YouTube channel. And before we go any further, if I can please encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel and consider sharing this video with others so that inshallah it can benefit others as well. Now this week's video is on a book that is on a really unique topic, the history of the Hanafi madhab in a period that has really not been studied very much. The book is titled The Hanafi School, a study of its social and legal dimensions. It's looking at the period between 189 Hijri to 340 Hijri. And this is a PhD dissertation by Salman Younas. Now, I've got some notes on this book as well, which inshallah I will share on our Telegram channel, which you can, by the way, simply access by going on Telegram and typing in @IK courses. You should see the Telegram channel turn up straight away and you should join that channel, and inshallah ta'ala I will share a PDF of these notes that you can have a look at and see some important points that are found within the book. So looking at the contents page, we have an introduction. So this is the introduction. It goes into the background, the early Hanafi school, previous studies, objectives and structure. Then we have the book divided into two parts. So we've got part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is on the social dimensions of the Hanafi school, which is divided further into 3 chapters. And then we have part 2, which is divided again into 3 more chapters, which is chapter 4, chapter 5 and chapter 6. So chapter 1 of part 1 is all about the social dimensions of the Hanafi school, and it kind of covers the Hanafi school beyond Baghdad in chapter 1. Then in chapter 2 it goes, you could say, from the students of the A'imma of the Hanafi madhab all the way up until, you could say, approximately 250 Hijri. And then in chapter 3 he goes beyond 250 to about 340 Hijri approximately. Then part 2 begins, and part 2 is also, as we've mentioned, divided into 3 chapters. You've got chapter 4, which is on the introduction to the legal paradigm and dimensions of the Hanafi madhab, the horizontal paradigm, which we're going to have a look at a bit later, which is brilliant. Chapter 5 is on implicit reliance on the master's doctrine in early legal texts, the text of Hilal and Al-Khassaf, and he looks quite a bit at Istihsan. I believe this book was written before Hassan al-Shahawi's How Subjectivity Became Wrong, because there is no reference to that book in the section on Istihsan. And chapter 6 is on the Hanafi school as an authoritative entity. He speaks also a lot about tarjih. He also speaks about generalizing activity, which is the idea of takhrijul usuli min al-furu' to a large degree. In here, you could say that in chapter 2 of part 1, he argues that Muhammad ibn Shuja' al-Thalji rahimahullah ta'ala was the chief Hanafi scholar in Baghdad from 250 Hijri onwards. Now there are so many unique and beneficial points in the book, which of course, being critical, we shouldn't accept immediately, which I don't think Sheikh Salman wants us to do either, but they seem pretty accurate, and there has been a tremendous amount of effort that has gone into the book. So whether we agree with everything in the book or whether a person can look at this book critically and come up with mistakes, whatever, I don't believe it should at all take away the effort and it is an absolutely incredible effort that has gone into writing this book, and you can tell the amount of hours the researcher has spent and the author has spent in reading various different books. So for example, and there are many unique beneficial points. So I want to start off with one unique beneficial point that you will find in this book straight away on page 22. He explains how, although we have this idea that Kufa was a major center of Islamic learning, which it was, but it wasn't long after the demise of Abu Hanifa that Hanafi scholarship essentially transferred to Baghdad and Basra. And this is a huge point, because we do know that Kufa was very significant. It always to some degree was significant, but it's important to appreciate that it was later eclipsed by Baghdad. So he writes, nonetheless, the sources do generally confirm the argument that Kufa ceased to be a major center of Hanafi legal activity shortly after the death of Abu Hanifa. These sources also reveal that the notion of Hanafi dominance in the city is not as easily discernible as some have argued. Rather, several jurists identified as Hanafis active in Kufa during the second half of the 2nd century are not securely connected to the school, settled in other regions, and/or were not remembered as playing a prominent role in expositing or spreading the legal doctrine of the school. And then he goes on to clarify that it doesn't mean Hanafi existence ended completely in Kufa after the demise of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, but it wasn't a major center for Hanafism after the demise of Abu Hanifa and after the creation of the city of Baghdad to a large degree. Now pages 51 to 66 have a very interesting discussion on the Ahlul Ra'i and Ahlul Hadith issue. Now this is something that has always perturbed me as well, that when we say that the Hanafis were described as the Ahlul Ra'i, we also have this dichotomy where on the one hand we notice so many of us trying to make everyone look like they were Ahlul Ra'i. So everyone was basically an Ahlul Ra'i. Imam Malik was Ahlul Ra'i. Everyone was basically following a Ra'i and practicing a Ra'i. We notice this even in books such as Usul Ifta wa Adabu of Mufti Taqi Uthmani, etc., wherein there's a concerted effort from the Hanafis to make it look as though a lot of scholars were actually Ahlul Ra'i. We notice this in all of the early traditional books. So this is one book that really helped me to kind of solve that problem, which is that if everyone is from Ahlul Ra'i, then why so much negativity towards the Hanafis? So this book, when we look at how this author explains it, it seems to be that the author has done a much more meticulous job. So this author does a decent job of looking at this much more meticulously and actually shows that the term Ashab al-Ra'i was at times used in a positive way and at times in a negative way and at times in a neutral way, depending upon whom it was being used as a reference to. So if we have a look on page 52, the author writes, such a positive usage of the term Ra'i was consistent with the word's original signification, namely sound and discretionary opinion, and reflects the generally favorable attitude traditionalists held towards earlier generations of Muslims. Yet when applied to scholars from a more contemporaneous period, such as the followers of Abu Hanifa, engagement with Ra'i was viewed in a more negative light by Ibn Sa'd. Abu Yusuf was described as having been won over by Ra'i after becoming a student of Abu Hanifa, as a result of which he turned away from traditions. Ash-Shaybani initially heard and gathered traditions only to become overcome by Ra'i after joining the study circle of Abu Hanifa. Similarly, Zufar was initially connected with the study of traditions until he looked into Ra'i, after which he too became preoccupied with it. So you can see these all negative connotations of Ra'i according to Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd does not always present his near contemporaries who engage in Ra'i in such negative terms. Uthman al-Batti is described by him as someone who was trustworthy, possessed traditions, and a person of Ra'i and fiqh. So if I just went and found every single place where someone was described as Ra'i, you'll find even the most staunch people who are against Ra'i are also described as being Ahlul Ra'i. So this is where I would say this is the golden nugget here. An analysis of Ibn Sa'd's positive hesitations of Ra'i reveals exactly what the issue was, namely a belief that Hanafis disregarded the primary text of the Quran and Sunnah in favor of personal opinion. Obviously there's much more to that. Ibn Abbas engaged in Ra'i only in the absence of such texts, Aisha only when it was required, and this is the main part. Ibn al-Musayyib's Ra'i was the Ra'i of traditions themselves, i.e. ahadith themselves, not Ra'i independent of them or undermining them. So this now helps us to kind of make sense of why we can't just use, every time a certain scholar is described as being Ahlul Ra'i, you can't just use that as evidence of the fact that, can you see, everyone was Ahlul Ra'i and there was nothing unique about what the Hanafis were doing. I think it's more important to be honest to our tradition and explain that there was a bit of uniqueness in the Hanafi Ra'i. Then the real beauty of the book actually begins from pages 69 to 134. So from basically this page onwards, 69 onwards, until page 134, wherein we've got loads of scholarly networks. So up until about chapter 4, basically until the end of part 1, wherein he discusses the primary scholars who played a role in making the madhab become an official madhab. This is so important, by the way, because we usually know a lot about the A'imma of the madhab and then the key writers like Al-Tahawi, Al-Jassas, Al-Quduri, Al-Sarakhsi. But what about those who came in between the A'imma and these major writers? What about all of those great scholars who played a role in making the madhab what it is today? They arguably played the most important role, right? And so we have the author presenting the scholarly links of Abu Sulaiman al-Juzjani, for example, on page 77. So there's loads of these diagrams that really help to paint a picture of exactly who these scholars were, what was their scholarly heritage and lineage, so to speak. So we've got Abu Sulaiman al-Juzjani's scholarly links on page 77. Then if we go on page 87, we've got the scholarly lineage of Bishr ibn al-Walid, a very, very prominent student of Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah. We've got Ibn Shuja al-Thalji on page 101. On page 101, you've got Muhammad ibn Shuja al-Thalji, who's obviously, according to the author of this book, a very important figure during the 3rd century Hijri. And then you've got Abu Khazim on page 119, which is right here on page 190. And by the way, this one can be considered a very important scholarly link for Imam al-Tahawi as well. So you could actually use this for learning about Imam al-Tahawi's teachers. And then Abu Khazim again on page 123. And then you've got Abu Sa'id al-Bardha'i on page 128, a famous teacher of Imam al-Qarhi. That makes at least about 6 diagrams of scholarly links. And you know, this is really, really beneficial about learning. And there are very, very few writings on this topic, by the way. Very beneficial to learn about some of the students of the A'imma of the Madhab. And then there's a really drop the mic type of comment here by Abu Sulaiman al-Juzajani, by the way, just to look into Abu Sulaiman al-Juzajani, who obviously one of the key narrators of Al-Asl and key transmitters of the Madhab and the text of the Madhab in general. It is said about him, and here it's mentioned on page 78, that indeed it is reported that Imam Ahmad sent a request to Imam Abu Sulaiman al-Juzajani rahimahullah, if you leave transmitting the text of Abu Hanifa, we will come to you to hear the books of Ibn al-Mubarak. Abu Sulaiman declined this offer. If you actually go back to the original version of this statement in Manaqib Abi Hanifa of Al-Kardari, he actually says, Ma masiruka ilayna yarfa'una. He's writing to Imam Ahmad, right? I mean, you gotta have guts to say this to Imam Ahmad. Abu Sulaiman al-Juzajani, when Imam Ahmad tells him that if you stop narrating the books of Abu Hanifa, we'll come to you. He says, he writes back to him, ما مصيرك إلينا يرفعنا ولا قعودك عنا يضعنا وليت عندي من هذه الكتب أوقارا حتى أرويها حسبة. He says, your coming to us is not going to raise us, and your not coming to us is not going to harm us. So there's a level of independency there, mashallah, from Abu Sulaiman. Then on page 113, there's a really, really interesting discussion wherein the author actually elaborates 5 points that the students of the A'imma did. He says, equally indicative of this emerging communal identity, if not more so, was the legal activity jurists or shown engaged in, which included preserving the doctrine of the Hanafi masters, number 1. Number 2, transmitting it to their students. Number 3, defending this doctrine. Number 4, identifying a basic methodological framework and underpinning it. And number 5, and writing commentaries on earlier texts. And you could probably say also takhrij could be added to this. The idea of rule determination could probably be added to this as well. One aspect, by the way, that has been unique about this book has been the sources that the author has used to draw the picture of the Hanafi community that existed between 200 Hijri and 300 Hijri. And the one source that he seems to have really benefited from is An-Nawazil of Abu Layth as-Samarqandi. And you can see this on page 108 to 109. You can see this complete references to As-Samarqandi's An-Nawazil, drawing so many examples from it. And by the way, the whole premise of this book, by the way, is to use many books like As-Samarqandi's An-Nawazil and other, historically biographical books to paint the picture that between 200 Hijri to 300 Hijri, there was already a growing Hanafi community. Even before the madhab became official after 300 Hijri, you already had a Hanafi legal community, so to speak, i.e. a group of scholars that all considered themselves, so to speak, as Hanafis. So mashallah, just to show you, by the way, he even uses manuscripts. So on page 103, you can see the author making a reference, I believe, to the recently printed Sharh al-Jami' al-Saghir of Imam al-Bazdawi. So al-Bazdawi Faydullah Effendi edition has been used. Then you can see on page 172, he makes a reference through Sharh al-Jami' al-Kabir of Imam al-Jassas to Abu Khazim's commentary on Sharh al-Jami' al-Kabir, which is considered one of the earliest, if not the earliest commentary on any Zahir Riwayah book. Abu Khazim's biography has been really benefited from through al-Jassas's commentary. So you can see Jassas's Sharh al-Jami' al-Kabir, which by the way the author uses even more on page 250. The author really benefits from Sharh al-Jami' al-Kabir of al-Jassas, which is not even printed, it's still in manuscript form. The author really benefits from this kitab, and we really actually, after reading this, I am really looking forward to Sharh al-Jami' al-Kabir of al-Jassas being printed, which inshallah it will be one day. Another really unique section in the book is when the author speaks about the Hanafi paradigm that the students of the A'imma were working in, wherein they were extracting the principles of the A'imma. So he uses a golden statement, by the way, on page 137. So if we go to page 137, there is a really unique comment there, which I really like, to be honest. It's really unique about how the Hanafi scholars were extracting the principles of the A'imma in a manner which may be described as vertical principles and horizontal principles. So he says, the paradigm that school jurists adopted and advanced and advanced, engaged the law both vertically and horizontally. The vertical dimension was concerned with the relationship between legal rulings and the primary sources of law. So that's Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', etc. In terms of the processes and mechanics involved in deriving the former from the latter. As such, it concerned itself with theorizing a method that purported to derive legal rulings exegetically from the revealed text. In contrast, the horizontal dimension is really important in fiqh, dealt mainly with the relationship of positive legal rulings, that's basically like masail that we've taken out from the Quran Sunnah, to one another. So how are the masail interconnected with one another? So this is really an area of fiqh that you could say a lot more attention is probably needed. An established juristic structure and how these rulings expressed and established general meanings and propositions governing specific issues, chapters or topics. And this we may refer to, he later actually even refers to as ma'ani, qawaid, dawabit, you can call it as well. And there are many books on this topic as well. So a very important book in general. The only other book on this topic, by the way, that speaks about the development of the Hanafi madhab, to the best of my knowledge, is actually another book titled The History of an Islamic School of Law, the Early Spread of Hanafism, which is written by, I don't believe the author is a Muslim, so I'm not sure, I've read it. It's not that bad in the sense that there is nothing negative towards our traditional Islam in that sense, but it's by a scholar by the name of Nurit Safrid. I believe, like I said, I don't believe the person is a Muslim, but she speaks about the spread of the Hanafi madhab. But the issue with this book is that it's more a discussion on the spread of the Hanafi madhab from a political perspective, whereas this book speaks more from a theoretical perspective. So hopefully this is inshallah ta'ala a good book for you to read, and I hope you benefit from this book. And of course, it does not mean we accept everything in the book, but this is really laying the foundations of how we can understand how the madhab developed up until the age of about 300 Hijri or 350 Hijri, when the madhab became an official madhab and it was an official school of thought. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you benefit from this book. Please, if you did enjoy this video, give it a like, share it with someone who might benefit from it as well, and inshallah ta'ala you will join me in the next video. Jazakumullahu khair wa ahsan al-jaza for watching. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.